namespace. So this is how your actual container technology is working. Am I clear on this? Yes. So even if you don't know all of this, you can still use container, but knowing them will understand what happens under the hood. Okay. But at this point of time, Microsoft didn't had all of this. Okay. So earlier when containers were created, containers used to work only on Linux. So then what Microsoft has done is, Microsoft, if you remember, I said that has changed the operating system code to enable container technology. So Microsoft also has created something called as namespaces. C groups basically means control groups. They have used exactly the same names, fortunately. Otherwise, Microsoft uses different names. So even in Windows, your containers work exactly because of the same things. Am I clear on this, sir? Yes. Okay. So now process tree. What would happen? With the help of PID namespace. With the help of mount namespace. Users with the help of user namespace. Network with the help of net namespace. CPU and RAM with the help of C groups. You can put limits. Okay. In addition to this, you will have union file system that comes into play, but this image will summarize everything. Okay. So even in the world of Microsoft, the terminology is exactly the same. There is no difference. Are we clear on this, sir? So do we agree that okay, Docker used to rely on Linux kernel to create containers. Okay, sir. I'm not sure, but still. Okay, sir. Okay. So Docker used to speak with Linux kernel. Linux kernel used to create containers. Okay. Earlier generation of container creation included Docker engine directly interacting with Linux kernel to create containers. Any problem with this? Okay. So is there any problem which you sense in this approach, sir? When can things fail? Okay. Right, sir. So when can things fail? Linux kernel has nothing to do with Docker. Do you all agree with me on this? Linux is altogether a different release cycle. Okay, because Linux is not meant only for this. They are not writing Linux for Docker. They are writing Linux for other purposes also. Now, in the first few releases, what used to happen is whenever new Linux kernel is released, and if there are any changes that used to happen in the areas which Docker is using it, containers used to stop work. So whenever there was a new kernel released, Docker has to quickly give out a new release so that your containers work. So this was becoming irritating. Okay. So now what Docker has done is, okay, let me not do this because this is always a risk, because whenever Linux is releasing a kernel, I can't make code changes. So what they have done is, at this point of time, okay, there were two things that were happening. They have basically developed something called as runc. Okay, or this project was basically called as libcontainer. This project was called as libcontainer, and libcontainer's implementation. Libcontainer is a design document. Okay, and the implementation of that is runc. So Docker used something called as runc to create container. Okay, runc used to create containers directly without relying on Linux kernels. It has its own implementation. So now Linux kernel releases will not impact your running containers. Are we clear on this point, sir? Okay. Now, this is the second generation which you need to basically understand. Okay. Docker has implemented runc to create containers. Okay, right. Now, just like every company, as your company is becoming an overnight success, what we tend to do is we want our customers happy. So Docker had started adding too many features to Docker. So many features so that Docker has started becoming fat. Fat Docker is no better than hypervisor, because we have VMware which is much better than this if you are making your Docker fat. Okay, so Docker lo chala feature ఇచ్చేస్తే అనవసరమైన అన్నిని Docker ki hypervisor ki తేడా ఉండదు. We already have a best hypervisor possible, which is called as VMware. We don't want one more VMware in the form of Docker. So Docker में ज्यादा फीचर्स अगर ऐड करके आपको हाइपरवाइजर की तरह ही बनाना है तो एक हाइपरवाइजर ऑलरेडी चल रहा है VMware, उसी को यूज कर लो. Okay, this was the whole stuff. When Docker was adding these features, then one more startup company has started giving something called as Rocket containers. Okay, so having a competition is a good thing, right? Yes, definitely that is a good thing. But the problem is the standards which Rocket followed and the standards which Docker followed were completely different. Two competing companies is good, but two competing standards is never good. Okay, so for example, if you have HTTP and many languages implement HTTP, who implements better, that's a different story. If you have many different things like HTTP, that's a different problem altogether. So now this was not a good area because this might kill the whole container ecosystem. Okay, forget about Docker and Rocket. So then at that point of time, many companies have sit like grown-ups, and then they have created something called as Open Container Initiative. Am I clear on this, sir? The basic idea of this Open Container Initiative was how containers should be. Okay, that's it. Nothing more than that. Okay, what feature should go into container technology and what should not go into container technology. What should container image sound like and what it should have and what it should not have. Okay, that's the whole idea of this open container initiative. And now if you try to see, there are lots of members inside this and all that stuff. Now what they have said is any container technology which is coming in, follow this. Okay. Now, what is an advantage of this? The advantage of this is the image which you have built using Docker technology, you can run it in other container technology also. Because everyone is, if they are open OCI compliant, it's the same thing which they are trying to build. So for example, if I write a YAML file from a notepad, and if I am trying to write a YAML file from a Visual Studio Code, will it make any difference? Because you and me are trying to write a YAML file. So in the same way, all the container organizations are trying to create images and containers which are based on the standard which is mentioned over here. So that's the reason why containers as such have become not much too much vendor specific. Okay, but even though Docker is the most widely used container technology, if you like some other thing, something like there is one more thing which is like Podman. Okay, so you do anything, it doesn't make the stuff. So running Docker images on Podman. You can run one images in any other container technology. Okay, right. So many container technologies came in, and now at this moment it doesn't matter because every container technology is OCI compliant. So whether you run Podman, whether you run Docker, right? But Docker is the most widely accepted format. That's the reason why you and me are learning this. So there is also something called as LXC, Linux containers, straight away. Okay. So it doesn't matter which container we use. Are we clear on this, sir? Yeah. Right. So now what Docker has done? OCI. What is OCI? Open Container Initiative was formed, and the architecture of Docker has changed from monolith to layered. Earlier, if you remember, we had only two components, Docker client and Docker daemon. Yes or no? Yes. Now when you install Docker, too many things happen. So let me try to show you that. I don't know draw that image, but it is already present. Okay. Okay. So this is what I was trying to tell in terms of what namespaces do. Okay. So if you try to see, in your operating system, you have different processes. Now we are getting a process with its own process tree. Who does that? PID namespace does that. So my process gets its own network interface. Who does that? Okay. So my process gets its own disk, which gets mounted to the root folder. Who does that? Mount namespace does that. My process gets its own set of users, and then it is basically achieved with the help of user namespace. How much of CPU, how much of RAM you want to put, any limits which you want to put, that comes under this. Okay. So earlier Docker was all about two components, client and daemon, and daemon was very fat component, right, which did almost everything. Now Docker is not that fat. So Docker client, you speak with daemon. Daemon doesn't know how to create containers now. It relies on a component which is called as container, and container D internally calls runc. If you remember, Docker has written runc, which knows how to create containers. Okay. So now the Docker's architecture is client calls daemon, daemon calls container D, and container D will call runc. So if you remember, while installing Docker, did we install container D also? If you remember few last days steps, నోట్స్ అసలు చూసి ఉంటారు నాకు తెలుసు ఖచ్చితంగా. When we install Docker, the 5 components are getting installed, and I said that there is something called as container D, and I said that I'll be speaking about container D and other 2 components later. So now, does container D makes any sense right now? So why? Daemon relies on container D, okay, which is called as the industry standard container runtime. So OCI gives 2 spec, container runtime spec and image spec. So we have totally 2 specs in Docker with respect to OCI. Are we clear on this, sir? Yeah. So now the advantage of this approach is client calls daemon. Daemon calls container D. Container D takes the help of runc to create a container. Once it creates the container, what it will do is it will try to make something called as Docker shim, a lightweight Docker parent of this. Okay. Why? The point is, after solving all of this, there was only one problem left. When Docker was getting updated, containers were getting stopped. Docker update అవుతున్నప్పుడు containers ఆగిపోయాయి. ఇది కూడా అవ్వకూడదు అనుకున్నారు. So even when Docker is updating, I want containers to be in running state. So what they did is, if I put this runc like this, then I have to stop the container. So what I'll do is, once runc creates the container, I will try to make one more thing, which is called as Docker shim, a lightweight component. Okay, the parent of this container, because whenever you are creating any container, it is a process is a tree. So in Linux, how do the processes start from? First process, and first process leads to the creation of second process leads to creation of third. So there is always a tree involved. Now the parent of this will no longer be runc, it will be Docker shim. Now what would happen is, when your Docker is updating, daemon updates, container D updates, runc updates, but shim doesn't update. Okay, so once those things are basically being done, then what would happen is, shim will report the status back to the container D and you will get everything. So while your container is while your Docker is getting updated, you can still run containers. So for this problem, they have done that. ఆ లెవెల్ వరకు ఇంటర్వ్యూలో ఎవరు వెళ్ళలేదు ఇప్పటి వరకు, వెళ్ళినా పెద్ద కష్టం కూడా ఇంకా. बट दिस इज द आर्किटेक्चर. इतने लेवल तक आज तक कोई नहीं गया इंटरव्यू में, बट मुझे बस इतना बताना है, even when you are updating Docker, you can still run containers. The reason of that is this architecture. Am I clear on this, sir? Yeah. Okay. Fine then. So in the world of Windows, this container D is replaced by compute services. Okay. But yeah, very soon you might see some differences, because container D is becoming capable of Windows world also. But if you try to see, are you seeing container D shim and then finally runc? Yeah, right. So there are many other things which are basically available. Okay, but container D is a very popular container runtime. Okay, and Docker uses it. Even there are, even we can basically have some of the Kubernetes components which run on it. So let us not bring in Kubernetes into discussion at this moment yet. Okay. So is this image clear, sir? One minute, sir. Just a moment, sir. Okay, sir. When there is a run C, why is container D required? Run C knows how to only create containers, but where it will pull images from. The only thing which run C is capable of is creating containers. But is that the only job? Yeah. Am I clear on that, Ashwini Kumar? Yes. So run C can create only containers, but who will manage images? Who will download images? Who will set the restrictions? Sir, if you got the answer, kindly I would recommend that you acknowledge with yes or no. Yeah, thank you. Right, sir. Fine then. So let us just have a look at this image. If you understand this image, then most of the problems will be solved from now on. Okay. So I take a physical server or a virtual machine, it doesn't matter. Okay. So this virtual machine will have definitely some operating system. I'm using Ubuntu, but you can easily replace with any other operating system. And this physical server or virtual machine will have CPU and it would have RAM. Whatever are the numbers, I'm really not worried about what the numbers are. And then it would have a disk. And finally, it will have a network interface using which your machine gets an IP address. Do you all agree with me on this? Okay. Now on this machine, what is it I'm trying to do? I'm trying to install Docker. Okay. So for some time, let us assume that you are using a laptop. Your laptop also has a network interface, which is basically connected to a network. Which is connected to a. So this is your organizational network. Let us assume that I have both of them over here itself. Any problem over here, sir? Yeah, right. Now I am trying to create a Docker container. Consider this to be your container. So let me call it as Nginx 1. So Nginx 1 also will have its own network interface. It will get its own disk, CPU, and do you all agree with me on this? Yeah. So kindly focus that this is important. Yeah. ఇప్పుడు వాట్సాప్ మెసేజ్ చూడకపోతే పెద్దగా మీరు ప్రాణాలు కాపాడే డాక్టర్లు ఏం కాదు, రైట్? ఫోకస్ ఆన్ దిస్ బికాస్ ఇఫ్ యూ అండర్స్టాండ్ దిస్ ఇస్ గోయింగ్ టు go till end of Kubernetes. Am I clear on this? Till here, are we clear? Yes. Okay. Now the point is, how can I access from my system the application that is running inside here? Am I clear on this, sir? So I have connectivity to this IP address. But the problem what is happening is when you create Docker, it creates a network. It creates its own network and Docker will be connected to this network. Now, the reason why you are trying to run your applications is because you want someone to access them. Do you agree with me on this, sir? Yeah. So now this user, that is laptop, with laptop, this is you, and you have access to this IP address, not to this IP address. Am I clear on the statement? Yeah. So నేను ఏం చేయగలను, దీన్ని యాక్సెస్ చేయగలను, కాకపోతే దీన్ని కాదు. मैं ये सिस्टम को एक्सेस कर पाऊंगा लेकिन इसको एक्सेस नहीं कर पाऊंगा. ये डॉकर का डिफॉल्ट बिहेवियर. डॉकर का कोई भी कंटेनर का ये डिफॉल्ट बिहेवियर. Am I clear on this, sir? Right. So now how do I solve this problem? Okay. So to solve this problem, I basically take an approach which is called as port forwarding. What is it? Port forwarding. The way port forwarding works is, if you try to look into it, Nginx over here, Nginx over here is running on port 80. Do you agree with me on this? Yes. Now on my system, I'll try to find a free port. Let that port number be anything. So let me try to call it as capital N. So this capital N can be 80 or this capital N can be 32,000. 32,000 and better. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll try to create a mapping between 80 port of the container and 32,000 port of the system. So now if I want to access Nginx, okay, let us assume that this IP address is A. Okay, or I'll call it as IP-A. So from my browser as a user, I'll be typing http://ip-a:32,000. Am I clear on this, sir? So what is that you're trying to do? You have an access to this IP address. So send a request to this. From there, you have created a port mapping or port forwarding. So 80 port of the container is mapped to 32,000. So now you are hitting this. Now let us assume that I create one more Nginx container. This is Nginx 2. Now this also has a network interface. Here also Nginx runs on 80 port. But this time I'll be mapping that to 32,001. So now if I want to access Nginx 2, I'll be accessing 32,001 port of this machine. And if I want to access Nginx 1, I'll be accessing 32,000 port. Did you understood this concept? Yeah. So on one machine, I'm running multiple containers, but I will not have access to their networks. To access the applications that are running inside the container, I will rely on port forwarding. So this is generally called as container port. Okay. Or application port. Okay. So this is something which is referred as host port or node port. Am I clear on this? Okay. The system's ports are referred as host ports or node ports. The port in which your application is running inside the container is called as node port. Is there anything confusing in this? Is there any doubt on this? Okay, right? So now, what is that I need to know now when I run the container? What are the ports that are free on my machine so that I can give access of that to others? Are we clear on this? Can we have two containers having the same port number? Where did two containers have the same port number, sir? You mean 80 and 80 here? కదంతా ఇని రాముడికి చేతి ఏమవుద్ది అన్నట్టుంది. The network interface వేరు. That means this gets its own IP address. This gets its own IP address. On two different IP addresses, if they are using the same port, మీకు వచ్చిన నొప్పి ఏంటి? आपके सिस्टम में भी Nginx चल रहा है, आपके लैपटॉप में, मेरे लैपटॉप में भी Nginx चल रहा है. कुछ प्रॉब्लम है? మీ ల్యాప్టాప్ లోని Nginx రన్ అవుతుంది, అది దానికి 80 పోర్ట్ కావాలి. నా ల్యాప్టాప్ లోని Nginx రన్ అవుతుంది, ఏమన్నా ప్రాబ్లమా? ఒకే ల్యాప్టాప్ లో 2 సార్లు Nginx అంటే అప్పుడు కదా ప్రాబ్లం వచ్చేది. एक ही लैपटॉप में अगर मुझे 2 बार Nginx चलाना है तब प्रॉब्लम आएगा, क्योंकि in that case what I am trying to do is I am trying to ask for the same port number, okay, from two different applications running inside the same system. ఇప్పుడు వరకు మనం మాట్లాడుకుంది ఏంటి? కంటైనర్ is an isolated area. Each area gets its own process tree, its own hard disk, its own network. Yeah? Seriously, sir? Yeah? Am I clear on this now? Yeah? So when I say container, it is treated as a different area. So two containers having same port number is not a problem. When what I can't do is, I can't map these 280 ports to the same port on this machine. Are we clear? Yes? Okay. So is there any doubt in this? Okay. So shall we try to do this? Yeah? Right. So what is this concept called as? Port forwarding. Right, sir. So what I'll try to do is, let me create 3 containers. The first container which I'll be trying to create is Nginx straight away. Nginx is a container. It requires 80 port. The second container which I'm going to create is Jenkins. It requires 80 port. And the third container which I'm going to create is, I'm going to create a MySQL container. MySQL container is a database container. Okay. It is, okay, it runs on port 3306. ఇవన్నీ మీకు తెలియాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు, గూగుల్ చేసినా తెలుస్తాయి. ఓకే, సో ఇట్ రన్స్ ఆన్ పోర్ట్ 88. It runs on port 80. Okay. 3 applications in 2 containers each. So that means that I'll be running Nginx 1, Nginx 2, Jenkins 1, Jenkins 2, MySQL 1 and MySQL 2, and I want to access all of that from my local system. Am I clear on this, sir? Okay. So ఆ AWS machine delete చేసామా? Okay, let me create an Azure. It's okay. In the last session, we have created a machine in AWS, right? So now I'm doing exactly the same thing, but this time I'll try to use the Azure. So let me go to virtual machines. Okay, sir. Now let me go to the virtual machines. Create a virtual machine and let me try to call it as Docker. And then let me try to call it as node 1. It is in Pune location. It doesn't matter in which location it is. So let me try to use B2MS, 2 virtual CPUs and 8 GB of RAM. Okay. Right. So there is only one thing which I'll be trying to do. I'll go to the next. I'll go to the networking section. And in the networking section, if you scroll down, you will see network security group. Network security group means which ports can you access on this machine. Okay. I don't want to put any restrictions. I want to open all the ports. So I'll just try to click on advanced, click on create new, and then try to that I want to add a inbound rule where I open all the ports. Star means open all, or you can give a number where you're opening the specific port. So I'm trying to that I'm opening all the ports. Okay. Now let me try to click on review and create. Okay. So when we install Docker, containerd also gets installed. Does it make sense now? Yeah. Why? Docker daemon takes the help of containerd, and containerd takes the help of runc, which creates containers. Right? Containerd manages all the images. Containerd does all the heavy lifting, but the actual container creation is basically done by runc. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, let me take this IP address. And let me have this IP address stored somewhere. Okay. So SSH del @ this. And the easiest way to install Docker is okay. SSH install. Right. So now what is it I need to do? Sudo. I need to add this current user to the Docker group. User mod -ag. Group's name is Docker and my current username is Dell. If you don't know what the current username is, you use $user. Since I know I'm using Dell. Let me exit, relogin, and Docker info. So is Docker working, sir? I get both the client version as well as server version. Okay. So what is it I want to run? I want to run. Yeah. So for this, let me try to write down the commands then. Okay. Why I can try to write all of them at one shot. So Docker container run. I want to run them in detached mode. -name nginx 1. And then the image's name is nginx. So let me try to call it as okay, sir. And then let me try to call it as Jenkins 1, and the image name is, if you remember yesterday we have seen this, Jenkins/Jenkins. And if I'm trying to do this, I'm indirectly asking for latest image because I'm only giving the image name. Jenkins 2 and Docker container run -d -name MySQL 1 MySQL : let me, I don't remember the MySQL's image name. Docker hub. Okay, let me go to the MySQL 8.0. I'll give tags to everything which I'm going to run right now. Okay, fine then. Okay, but whenever you are trying to run the MySQL image, there is one thing which you have to mandatorily do, that is pass this extra stuff. I'll try to speak about what that is, but at this moment, don't worry about what that is. Okay, So it is basically what is the password of your database, because you need something to log in. If you don't pass, it will fail. So I'll try to tell that my password is password itself. Okay, right. Now with this, I can create 6 containers, right? Okay, so shall I create it? Yeah. But what would be the problem? Each of them will be running in their own IP addresses, and there will not be any way for me to access it from the outside world, but I'm okay with that. I have copied all the 6 commands at one shot. First time it will take the time because it has to download the image also. Yeah. Okay, sir. Now, if I try to execute Docker container ls or Docker ps, and if you try to look at the status, this is the status which I would get. Okay, sir. So it is trying to tell that all the 6 containers are running. These are the, sorry, these are names of your containers. But the problem is these containers are useless for me because I can't access them from outside world. Am I clear on this? Okay. So the above containers are not useful for me as I cannot access them from outside the virtual machine where I have installed Docker. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, sir. Now here, let me delete all the containers. So to delete all the containers, if you try to look into the command is, if you remember yesterday, we have gone through the cheat sheet. Docker container rm. Since the container are in running state, I have to write -f, and then I need to write what are the containers which I want to run. Nginx 1, execute this, and then Nginx 2, and after that Jenkins 1, Jenkins 2, MySQL 1, MySQL. Okay, but I hate this approach. Why should I do all of this? Okay, right. So let me copy all of these commands and recreate all of them. So this time it will not take that much of time because images are already available. Now Docker container ls or Docker ps, you can use any one of them because they are aliases. Okay. Now I can execute the same command by trying to tell that Docker container rm -f Nginx1, Nginx2, what was it? Jenkins1. You can use tabs. Jenkins2, and then MySQL1 and MySQL. This is also good, right? Little bit better than what we have done as in the previous case, but still I need to type all of that. I don't want. So let me try to recreate all of this. Okay. So to the Docker container rm-f command, I can pass container names in a space limited format, or I can also pass container IDs. So let me try to look into what this command's response is. Docker container ls -q. So what is it trying to do? Is it not giving me container IDs? If I try to tell -a, it will try to tell me the container IDs of all of the things. If I just do -q, that means it is giving me container IDs of running containers. If I do -a-q, it is giving me for every container. So are you clear on this, sir? So now what I'll do is Docker container rm-f, and then I use $. So in the world of Linux, whenever you try to write anything inside dollar parentheses, that means that first this command will be executed, and then the output of this command will be sent as will be executed after that. So over here, if I try to tell echo nginx1, sorry, saying it has removed nginx1 container. Yeah, but the better way of doing that is in this pass docker container ls -a and -. So that means that first get all the containers, container IDs, pass that to this rm-f command, then it would be deleted. And you can apply the same logic to remove all the images also. Okay, so this is the Linux sub command. So delete all the images. So what is that you need to do? Docker image rm, docker image ls-q, because there is nothing called as all images. By default, all the images will be shown. Am I clear on this, sir? You can apply this logic to remove anything if you want to basically delete all the images and all the containers. Are we clear on this, sir? Okay. Now let me try to run an individual container and then try to show it to you. So I can run docker container run -name test, and then I'm trying to use -p. Okay. So for port forwarding, we have two modes. One is static, the other one is dynamic. So if you're using static, what you need to do is you need to pass -p. Okay. Host port colon container port. Okay. So what I'll do is -p 32,000 will be mapped to the 80 port for an nginx container. Okay. And then let me try to give -d also, because I want to run it in a detached. Okay. Now if you try to do docker container ls, are you seeing it? It is trying to tell that whatever container which you are trying to run, it is mounted onto this. Okay. Right, sir. So let me go to this machine, and what is its IP address? This is its IP address, right? Now http:// This colon, what is the port number? 32. Am I saying welcome to Nginx? So am I able to access this application? Contain rm hyphen f. Yes, sir. Yeah. So get used to this command. Okay. Now let us have a look at all the 6 commands which we were trying to run earlier. So I'll try to basically let's apply dynamic port forwarding. So what is that I need to do? All I need to do is replace this hyphen d and then I shall let me call it as hyphen d hyphen capital P. Do we understand the difference between capital P and small p now, sir? Okay. So shall I run this now? Docker ps. Okay. So these are the ports. So shall I connect to all the systems over here? Yes. Right. Now let's connect to Jenkins. So let us try to look at this image. Okay. Okay. What is the application which is Jenkins? This one. And what is the port number? 32774. Yes. Okay. So let me basically take this and 32. Oh, not that. They might have 2 ports. We need 8080. 8080 is mapped to what? 32771. Are you seeing some home page of Jenkins is appearing? Yeah. Right. Okay. Nginx we have connected, but still we will connect now. Let's connect to Nginx. So Nginx 32770 or 32769. You can use any one of them. So let me go with 32770. Do I get Nginx? Right, sir. Now finally, let's connect to MySQL. So let us try to look into what is a MySQL port. What is MySQL port? 32778. So let me go over here and then let me type 32778. Is it working? That means there is something wrong with MySQL, right? Every application is not accessible over browser, sir. That is the first thing which you need to understand. Okay. So end user applications, for example, Jenkins was an application which was designed to be accessible over the browser. So it was responding to your browser request. Nginx was also the same thing. Whereas MySQL server is designed to interact with MySQL clients, which can be command lines or UIs. So for MySQL, all you need to do is go to the Perplexity. What are MySQL clients? So you can connect to the MySQL using command line clients or graphical user clients. But for this, you need to have certain things installed on your machine. But okay, you can ask the same Perplexity on how to install MySQL client. I'm not going to do that. But what I'll do is, I have MySQL client installed on my machine. So let me try to tell MySQL. And then I need to pass -h, which is the host name. So what is the host name? Host name is nothing but this IP address. Okay. And for host names, you should be giving names or IP addresses, but not HTTP stuff. Okay. And then it is asking what is the user. User is root. And what is the password? You ask for a password. But there is also one more information which I need to worry about. How do I pass the port information? Because by default, MySQL will always try to access 3306 port. So for that, MySQL --help, or you can basically ask Google for that. So let us try to see if there is anything called as port name here, over here, port number. MySQL P, yeah, capital P, yeah, or --, port equals to and port number. So let me try to write --, port equals to, what is the port number of MySQL? 32777. Yes. So 32777. Then it is asking what is my password. So while creating this machine, I have given the password as password. So am I inside the database? So don't expect every connectivity to be HTTP. ఇది చాలా మంది చేసే తప్పు. MySQL రన్ చేసి కూడా browser connect చేసి, sir, this is not working for me. No, every application does not have the same interface. If you are running Jenkins, if you are running web servers, they respond to web requests. It was my database, it was running to the responding to the client request. You need to figure out what is your server and what is the client for that. For example, if I was running a Postgres database, I would have installed the Postgres CLI. If I was in running a Mongo database, then I would have found out what is a MongoDB client. So depending on what is running inside that, figure out what is the client. Okay, there are many applications where browser is a client. There is no doubt about it, but it doesn't mean that everything should run on browser. Am I clear on this? Yes. Okay. Fine then. Okay. There is one more interesting thing which is called as PHP. PHP my. So here what you can do is you can manage MySQL by using this web application. Okay. So for this web application, okay, it will try to tell what are the things which you need to basically run and all that stuff. But let me try to see. Okay, sir, is run just చూద్దాం. Docker run -d -name php myadmin 1 and -P and then php myadmin. Okay, sir. PHP myadmin and it runs on 32779. So 32779. Okay. Now it is asking what is your username and what is your password. So the basic point is while you are creating this machine, if you would have given MySQL host name and ID, you can connect using this. Sometimes they might be basically using this, but in our case, it is not going to work out because if you try to look into it, while you are creating this machine, what is that you can pass? You need to pass MySQL username and MySQL this, and you're supposed to do something called as link. And if you want to use, we need to give -pma host. Okay, right. Ivanni pass chette, there are ways to connect from databases from web, and your company might be using one of them also. It doesn't matter. But the whole point which I'm trying to tell is not all applications are accessed over browsers. Are we clear on this, sir? And then one final thing which I'll try to speak, and then we will stop for today. Are you seeing this 0.0.0.0? Okay, let us just try to understand what does that mean. Okay, right, sir. So generally in whenever you have virtual machine, you have a virtual machine or a physical machine, whatever it is, and then you will have network interface, and network interface gets an IP address. So let us assume that I got this is network interface A, and then I got an IP address of 192.168.0.10. Okay, right. Now, is it required for me that I need to have only one network interface, or can I have more than one network interface? ఒకదానికన్నా ఎక్కువ ఉండటం కుదురుతుందా? Is it possible to have more than one network interface? Your laptop already has it. From your laptop, can't you connect to the Ethernet cable and also a Wi-Fi adapter? Are there not more than one network interface? So in your system, you can have as many network interfaces as you want. So now I might basically have one more network interface which might have an IP address of 192.168.0.102. And I am trying to run a Docker container and I want to do port forwarding. So when I'm doing port forwarding, it will ask which port are we speaking about. When I'm doing port forwarding, should I forward whatever is running in this application on network interface A or network interface B? Okay. 0.0.0.0 means on all the network interfaces. Am I clear on this, sir? What does 0.0.0.0 means? All network. On Linux machines, what happens, which will be Linux machine, which is called as local host network interface, where 127.0.0.1. So when your application is exposed only on this, that means that only people who are inside this machine can access your application, not outside. Not outside. Am I clear on this, sir? So, okay, sudo apt install net tools. So on this machine, let me try to see how many network interfaces do I have. If I'm not wrong, I should have more than innona jodne. Yeah? Right, sir. Are you seeing yellow? Yellow stands for loopback adapter. So this is where you will have 127.0.0.0 ETH0. This is my virtual machine's IP address. Rest of all of the network interfaces are the result of Docker installation. అసలు ఇన్ని ఎందుకు క్రియేట్ చేసిన డాకర్ ఓకే ఇన్ని క్రియేట్ చేసిన అవసరం ఉందా దట్ ఈస్ సంథింగ్ విచ్ విల్ ట్రై టు అండర్స్టాండ్ ఇన్ ఆర్ సబ్సిక్వెంట్ క్లాసెస్ బట్ టుడే do we understand how to run containers and how to expose ports to the outside world? Yes. So what I would recommend to you to practice today is try to create one machine and install Docker, and I want you to do it in both AWS and Azure, and ensure that you have a security group where everything is open. And I have tried to run few applications. Even if you run exactly the same things, I'm absolutely okay with that. Okay, so I want you to run the 6 containers and expose them to the outside world. Okay, so hopefully today, if the things are right, tomorrow we'll have a 3 hours Docker session, sir. Otherwise we'll have 1.5 hour session itself. Okay, so I have the problem with respect to the throat. I'm not supposed to speak more, but unfortunately I can't give a pause also, right? So that is a problem. Okay, so are we clear on this? Yes. Okay, so today what is your exercise, sir? Exactly do the same thing, and any doubts which you have, kindly bring it to my notice. So far whatever has happened in Docker, do we have any doubts? So is our understanding becoming better? So what is a Docker definition now? Docker is a process tree, its own user space, its own network, its own CPU and memory. So are they not private in itself? And inside that Docker container, your application will have everything that it needs. So it runs naturally. That's the whole idea. Okay, right, sir. So I could have said the same definition on day one, but your chances of understanding without looking into all of that is 0. Because now we understand that inside the container there is something which we are getting our own users and all that stuff. Now it makes a logical sense. Okay, now the application might run over here. Okay, and how is this possible? With the help of 3 major components, out of which I have spoken about 2. One is namespaces, the other one is C groups. C groups puts restrictions. Okay, namespaces gives an power to your process, that is special process. So your isolated area, it gives you some special additions, right? Okay, so many people expect this on day one, and many people deliver this all day on also, but unfortunately I can't do that, sir, without knowing the ground rules, without knowing this stuff. It is very easy for me on day one to do this, sir. Chala mandi em chestar, nenu okkar chupistanu meeku. Okay, so that you understand the difference. I can conveniently do this. Docker pull nginx. So in Docker we use only 2 commands, pull and push. So I pull, I push, I run an application inside that. Okay, that is fine. మీ చెవులకి కళ్ళకి ఆనందంగా ఉంటుంది. రేపు పొద్దున్న ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వెళ్తాడు, my container is getting stopped, how do you ఇప్పుడు ఏం చెప్తావు? My trainer has not want those things to happen. Okay, So even I take the hardest route because I want you also to do the same, because it might be difficult in the beginning, but eventually you will understand what is happening. Now, did our understanding of Docker change from day one? Yes. Okay. Now, after all of this, what we will be trying to speak is, okay, when I want to run everything inside one machine, it is fine, but
Yep.
I want to run my application on thousands of machines now. What will I do?
Glassnode.
Okay. Then Docker can't do anything. That is the point where Kubernetes comes into play. సో ఫస్ట్ అసలు మన అప్లికేషన్ ఒక చిన్న ఏరియాలో రన్ చేయటం, దాన్ని ఒక సర్వర్లో రన్ చేయటం, అక్కడ వరకు డాకర్ సరిపోతుంది. ఒకటి కాదు, నా దగ్గర 1000 మెషిన్లు ఉన్నాయి. ఇప్పుడు ఏం చేస్తాం? కుబర్నెటీస్ కావాలి. कुबरनेटीज ఎందుకు కావాలి? సో एक नहीं 1000 मशीन्स में चलाना है मुझे, तब कुबरनेटीज चाहिए. क्यों चाहिए? कुबरनेटीज को ही क्यों यूज करना है? तो there is a sequence, and this sequence has a certain expectation from you to finish the things every day. So kindly do that, because there are certain problems which we solve over here, we have to solve that in Kubernetes also. Okay, right? So Docker Swarm is like Yahoo search. So if I ask you to search anything on the internet, what are the chances that you will be using Yahoo search? Even Docker has started giving Kubernetes as part of their enterprise editions. That is the reality of Docker Swarm. I am not even speaking about Docker Swarm. Okay. సో శిథిలావస్థకి చెందిపోయిన టెక్నాలజీలు దయచేసి నా దగ్గర వద్దండి. ఇప్పటికి మనం మాట్లాడేదే చాలా ఎక్కువ సార్. సార్, ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు నో, let me tell you one thing. This is not something which I'm trying to tell as marketing stuff. Tell me one Docker course or one DevOps course where you have GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, Argo CD, Kubernetes, Helm charts, Customize, observability, DevSecOps, and Ansible. If there is any, I'll try to tell your answers. Okay. మీకు ఇంకా ఇవి కాకుండా ఇంకా కావాలా? ఈ సరిగ్గా నేర్చుకుని సరిపోద్దా? నేను మాట్లాడేదే ఎక్కువ, అవి కాక మళ్ళీ పాత అడిగితే నేను నో, రైట్? అండ్ ఇన్ ది రెస్పెక్టివ్ ఆఫ్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ దిస్, యూ విల్ బి గెటింగ్ ద వీడియోస్ ఆఫ్ Jenkins and Elasticsearch. If you want, you can go through that, or else you can stick to whatever I'm trying to deliver in the classroom. That is more than enough. Am I clear on this, sir? Right? So content wise, at least what you can do is you can blindly trust me, because I know DevOps much better than most of you, and whatever is required in the industry, that is my problem. Your problem is whatever I am trying to deliver in the class, kindly follow that. I am not trying to tell this out of arrogance. I am trying to tell all of this out of confidence, because you go and search whatever I'm speaking in any company with someone who is working with, or any job descriptions which you will try to look at, we are fit for more than 70% of what we are trying. ఓకే, 100 ఓపెనింగ్లు పడితే ప్రపంచంలో డెవాప్స్లో ఎక్కడన్నా 70% కన్నా ఎక్కువ మనం డైరెక్ట్ ఫిట్ అవుతాం. అంతకంటే ఎక్కువ ఫిట్నెస్ రేషియోకి నేను తీసుకెళ్తే దీన్ని 2 ఏళ్ళ కోర్స్ చేయాలి. ఓకే, సో ఐఎమ్ నాట్ గెటింగ్ ఇన్ టు దాట్. సో ఆర్ వి క్లియర్ ఆన్ దిస్, సార్? Terraform is included in the course or not? I was the first one to do that, sir. Yeah, sir, కోర్స్ కంటెంట్ అన్న మీరు చూస్తారు, మీరు మరీ నన్ను గుడ్డిగా నమ్మేస్తున్నట్టున్నారు. కోర్స్ కంటెంట్ కూడా చూసినట్లేరు మీరు నన్ను. ఓకే, Terraform is definitely the part of the course, sir. Yeah, నాకు ఈ రెండు మధ్యలో ఉన్న, అయితే పరమ భక్తులు లేదంటే నాస్తికులు, ఈ మధ్యలో ఎవరు ఉన్నట్లేరు ఎవరుని. రైట్, ఓకే, fine, sir. So it is not about me being better and all of that stuff. I want you guys to be better. I want you guys to be better than the competition. That's the reason I try to cover a little bit more than what is required. So my basic urge to all of you is kindly follow what I am trying to tell, rather than worrying about what I am going to tell or not. Because if you inquire a little bit about me, even if it is delayed, I try to cover everything. The only thing that might happen is I might have forgot, but intentionally I'm not even leaving one single topic. This is what is me. Whether sometimes people get bored out of this. వదిలేస్తే బాగుంది ఇంకెన్నాళ్ళు అనిపిస్తుంది, రైట్? సో కంటెంట్ వైజ్ డోంట్ వరీ అబౌట్ ఇట్. Please focus on what I'm trying to deliver every day and understand that. And if there are any issues which you are facing with that, okay. And one more thing also here, you get lot of chances to resolve your doubts, right? You can speak with Gopi. If the things are not working out, they will tell me, or you try to bring it to my notice. in the next day. All I want you guys to do is be good with this Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and one CI/CD tool. Without this, you are going nowhere. Okay, so you have to be extremely good with all of these things. So kindly please focus on this. Yeah, you have a MacBook and I'm trying to contact. Can you please reach me out so that I can clear conversation of how can I learn, sir? Someshwar, there is nothing fancy about Mac, sir. The only thing which is difficult with Mac is Quality Thought video player. And for Quality Thought video player, as an alternative, what you can do is go and download something called as VMware Fusion. And on the VMware Fusion, you need to install Windows, that is just to watch videos. Apart from that, whatever I do in the class, you can absolutely do on the Mac as well. There is no difference. When I'm trying to open Windows terminal, you try to open the Mac terminal. That's the only difference. Okay, so if you have any difficulties in this, what we can do is we can you can basically try to. Did you create the accounts first of all? The only problem which you would have is with respect to video watching, sir. Okay, kindly get in touch with Gopi today. Try to tell him what your doubts are. Okay, I'll try to help you resolve. Is that okay, Someshwar? Gopi and Lakshmikant, I tried to contact. Where? From Telegram. Today they will respond, sir. They might you ping them once, because they have to resolve many people's doubts, right? Just try to ping them, they'll help you out. You didn't got their account. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So do one thing, sir. Ask Lavanya to send their contact number and directly WhatsApp on that number. Okay. Fine, sir. Without running the dynamic port, do we have to open the ports when running on VMware? See, opening the ports on the VMware, Stephens, depends on whether you have firewall installed over network interface or not. If you have not installed the firewall, there is no need for you to open the ports. But generally in the VMware also there is a signing mechanism. You define basically it is whether you have a firewall or not. On cloud, firewall is enabled by default. That's the reason we open it. Okay. You mentioned about email for DevOps. One system was it sent. What email for DevOps? Are you asking about that Learning Thoughts access? No, sir. I've not done anything. I was just lying on bed doing nothing, watching Netflix series. This is the reality of what I've been doing for the 2 days. And today also I'm actually supposed to do that. I couldn't stay at home. I came here. Yeah, because my doctor strictly recommended not speaking too much. Yeah, right, sir. So I'll do that from Tuesday onwards, sir. Please. Yeah. Fine. Thank you, sir. I think I have to stop that. We have to start the cloud session also. Okay.